Hey everybody, this is Professor Jason Snart. I'm your instructor for our English 2250 creative writing class online in the very short 5-week summer term here at COD. So I'm recording this welcome video which shows you both me and our course. So I'm going to do a little bit of introducing myself, but also walking through a little bit of what is going on in our course. So this video actually kind of is good evidence of a couple of the things that I'm really most concerned about when I teach online, and that's first of all you feeling connected to like me as a person, so that I'm not just like a name attached to an email or text that you just happen to bump into online. I'm like an actual human being here. I've taught at COD for over 10 years. Been doing the creative writing class for a long time now, so I really enjoy doing it. I actually love I love the online format for creative writing. I think a lot of people are skeptical about it, thinking that creative writing happens best when you're either alone in just a sort of a solitary thing where you do your writing, and then in a workshop environment where you're in a room with lots of other people who've written a poem or short story, and you swap and you provide feedback, and it's really energetic and kind of interactive and all that kind of stuff. And that's true. Those are good experiences. And the workshop is part of what we do in our course here. It actually kind of anchors us as we go through. But what I've discovered is that the online format is actually really, really good for the workshop format, or really for a creative writing class. Not only do you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of your time, where you're not having to come to class and do like a writing exercise in 50 minutes on a Wednesday morning or whatever it happens to be. So we have due dates, obviously, but it's not like we all have to be in the same room over and over again for 50 minutes or an hour and a half, or even longer in the 5-week format, like 3 hours. So it works really nicely for the kind of individual idiosyncratic schedules that some people have, especially for something like writing. Some people like to write early in the morning, late at night. Sometimes you just have to make it work around your work schedule or life schedule or whatever else is going on. So there's that side of it, but also the online format is actually really good for the workshop environment, which kind of surprised me. I shouldn't have been surprised. I should have figured this out. But what we'll do, and you'll see this when you look a little bit deeper into our course, is that throughout we'll have some kind of build-up units to a particular genre, like poetry, short story, creative nonfiction, whatever we happen to be working on. And then you'll write something in that genre. You'll write a poem, you'll write a short story, and then you'll be in a workshop group where everyone in that group submits what they've written. And then instead of the face-to-face where we would like provide kind of verbal comments, you'll actually provide a marked up document back to each of the people in your group. And this is what ended up being really so beneficial in the online environment, is that instead of like in the face-to-face where you kind of get a lot of feedback, but if you really think about it, it's sort of generic and you can't remember who said what, and the thing that somebody said doesn't really apply to your piece, like they didn't really read it. But now you're getting like if there's 5 people in your group, including you, that means you're getting your short story back 4 different times with actual comments in the text, with things highlighted, with a note in the margin, with corrections to basic mistakes, questions about bigger things like character or the story or whatever. And that's like way more beneficial necessarily than just sitting in that classroom and trying to get that verbal feedback. Not that that doesn't work, but I find that the online environment is actually really, really good for a creative writing class. But oftentimes when you're online, it can feel kind of like disconnected or cold. If you never see me, if you never see your other classmates, you don't have the opportunity to interact. So one of the things I'm really concerned with is that that you really, or we really feel like a class together, not just you individually out there somewhere working through a bunch of static material. Hopefully it feels a lot more alive and dynamic than that. So that's one piece of it, like engagement by being kind of present from my side of it, but also from your side of it. And then the other thing that this video will do a little bit of is that I will kind of walk us through basically how the course works. So I hope it's fairly simple and transparent and you can, kind of get the hang of it right away. But having done lots of online classes myself, from the student side, not the teacher side, I know that even what ends up, like finally the light bulb goes off and you're like, oh, I finally get it. How did I not figure that out? Sometimes what seems really clear and simple sounds silly, but until you get it, you don't get it, right? So I never know, or I work really hard to make our class as easy to navigate as possible, to lay things out, make them findable, make the pieces fit, make all the requirements on you like really obvious so you know what is expected of you. But I don't assume that it's just like magically everybody suddenly understands how the course works. So feeling connected to the class as a community, but then the other side of it is like feeling confident and comfortable just in Blackboard. You don't want a bunch of technical stuff getting in the way of the actual class that we're doing, especially in the 5-week format, because if it takes you, like, let's say a week, that would actually be a long time, but if it takes you a week just to sort of figure out what's going on, well, a lot of the class passes by in that one single week. Remember, our class would normally be like a 16-week class, so we're jamming that into 5, so we move basically like over 3 times as fast pretty quickly. You'll notice that in the due dates here, which I'll show you in a sec. Okay, so the announcements is where you'll always land when you come into our course. There'll be video stuff like me talking or just a screenshot or whatever, screen capture of our course. It's always important to look at that stuff. Don't skip through it. It, for the most part, won't be new information, but it'll reinforce a lot of what we're doing in the class, whether it's concept stuff, information about grading, reminders about due dates. Again, just basic stuff to help you be successful in the class. You'll see our syllabus, which is pretty standard kind of stuff, nothing major there. You may want to look through some of the policies, course goals, nothing that's probably going to be really surprising to you. Obviously, our textbook information, most of our units, I would say, have a reading, maybe well over half, I would say. And that provides really the kind of the foundation of a lot of what the activities that we do in the class. So it's really important to make sure you have the book and to do the readings actively as part of the class. There's a student homepages link, which will make sense in a second, but our two really most important links as we keep working through the course is the units and the due dates. I'm going to go into due dates first. So the due dates, as you can probably guess, just lay out when each of those units is due. We move through each unit, each has its own due date. You'll notice that we double up on 2 and 3. There's a couple of times that we'll do that to, again, accommodate the really compressed compressed semester that we're in, but also to give us a little bit more time so we're not rushing through the workshop part of it, where you're actually having to produce a piece of fiction, for example, which ideally will take longer than maybe some of the earlier discussion board stuff. But I've tried to keep it more or less regular so we can get into the habit of like what's due on what day. So obviously, right, Unit 1 is due right around the corner, Wednesday, May 27th. And always be conscious of due dates coming up, not just the one that we're working on. And again, noticing that 2 and 3 are due next week, but that's 2 units that you've got to account for. Readings, discussion board, writing your own stuff, whatever those units might entail. So in addition to knowing, right, that what's immediately there, take a look at the whole list here so you get a sense of how it kind of breaks out. And then, of course, what you'd want to do is take a quick look into the Units tab, where you'll see each of our unit is its own folder with a title that kind of suggests what we might be doing in there. Number 1, or Unit number 1, has us just introducing ourselves. Again, trying to get that sense of a class community. You're not just out there on your own, you're actually here with peers in the online environment, and you'll be working together in groups throughout the course. This is, you'll also find the assignment for the home page. So if you wondered about that link in the course menu, the assignment for it is actually in Unit 1 here. Okay, so like I'd mentioned before, we move through units. Our first genre that we cover is the short story. So we do kind of some overarching discussion or thinking about what it is to work like a writer, to be a writer. One of the most important pieces of the course is over here. You'll be directed to the so-called rules of creative writing. It's really important that you don't even have to necessarily agree with them. I don't put them forward as my subjective opinion about what's good writing and what's bad. These are based on my many years of being a writer and teaching writing, what I think are pretty foundational, almost objective rules. Like very few professional writers would, I think, disagree. And I'm not trying to like gloat about that or anything. But it's not just my idiosyncratic opinions. I'm trying to provide to you what I think is reflective of agreed upon standards in the discipline of creative writing. Now, obviously, there's lots of wiggle room in there, lots of gray areas. But so we work through some of that general kind of what it is to be a writer, then a little more specifically into the idea of short fiction, a short story, and then we build up to Unit 5, which is kind of that first anchor point, the short story workshop. So you'll be writing a short story, you'll be in a group, you submit your file to the discussion board, there'll be one due date for that, and then everybody in the group reads everybody else's short story, marks up the document, not just like one little comment, but like really intensive, intrusive writing in there, and then reposts it. There'll be a second due date for that. So you as the participant will submit your story, but then get back like 3 or 4, however many people are in your group, versions of your short story, all with hopefully useful feedback. If one person thinks the title's no good, well, you can maybe work with that. If everybody thinks the title's no good, the title probably needs some work, right? So it's really good to get that group feedback, not just individual feedback. So you'll notice that the course just kind of continues like that. We finish up the short story, we move into creative nonfiction. We have that creative nonfiction workshop, then we do poetry, and then we're done. I mean, honestly, you'll find that 5 weeks goes really, really quickly. Some of the individual units may seem like there's a lot of work in them or you're doing a lot of writing, but that's kind of what you signed up for. And it's really beneficial. It's great to be, and this is from someone who had to go through lots of these classes, it's great to be forced to write a short story, right? To have a deadline. It actually really helps you as a writer. Okay, the other thing that I want to talk about then really briefly is the grading and sort of feedback situation. So one of the things that people can be really, really nervous about, uncomfortable with, is you're in a creative writing class, but you don't feel like you're a great writer yet. You feel maybe comfortable as a short story author, but you've never done poetry before. So people get really anxious about their grade, right? Which is understandable. But I have set up this course, and I think this works really well. The quality or the grade that you're getting is really for the most part not based on the so-called quality of the writing. So I don't read your short story and give you a B for some reason and an A for another reason, or any of that mess. It would be really challenging to negotiate that between you and I, but also it's not really the purpose of a course like this, is to grade your writing. So if you're not confident in your abilities as a writer, that's okay. That's kind of why you're in the class, right? In fact, the whole idea of a workshop isn't to submit what you think is a perfect short story. That would defeat the purpose of getting feedback. The short story you submit, or the poem, or whatever workshop we're in, is really meant to be like kind of halfway there. It's complete, right? But it's in an early draft phase. It might have pieces that need work, right? They need work. So I'm not going to grade that and say, oh, the short story you submitted here is clearly a draft, so it gets a B or a C. I mean, the whole reason you submit it is to get feedback because it's not finished. So giving a grade on that just doesn't make any sense, does it? So what is the grade based on? Okay. Especially for the workshops, it's really simple. You've posted your file on time in a format that people can get, so like a doc or whatever. The only one that is problematic is a Pages, so just stay away from that one. So how simple is that, right? The grade, not entirely, but in part, is based on, did you post it on time? So post it on time. And then the bulk of the grade is actually for the quality of the feedback you provide to other people. And again, you don't need to be a great writer to provide great feedback, because you just need to be a reader. You need to think about, am I interested in this? Do I like this character? Is the character complex? Do I hate the character because I'm supposed to hate the character? And then ground that in the specifics. Like, I really like this description because you used this word and this word, which are really evocative, not just generic cliches. So you do that throughout an entire short story for each person in your group, and you get full points for that workshop, regardless of the so-called quality of your own short story. Now, the caveat to that is that while I don't really grade or provide feedback on the individual writing that you're doing, obviously I need to see investment of time and effort. So you can't just throw something together that's clearly the night before and expect to get full points for that. And also I'm looking for, to some degree, the application of these rules of creative writing that are in our course here, and also material that we've worked through in units that are kind of leading up to our short story. And again, like the application of the ideas in this rules area, or ideas from our previous units or previous readings in the textbook. The short story is not really the place that you would show how you totally get it perfectly and you can now do it perfectly. It's kind of your opportunity to try that out. So again, I wouldn't take that short story in a draft form where you're just testing an idea out and then slap a grade on it for being less than perfect. That just doesn't make sense for anybody, for you, for me, for the class as a whole. It's just not good, right? So the grading is set up much differently, which hopefully is good news to you. But also puts the onus on you for doing things basically just on time, especially in the 5-week format. We move pretty quickly, so you really got to keep on top of things. It's kind of an intense 5 weeks, but once it's done, you've got that whole like 3 credits under your belt in a third of the time. So it's kind of a good deal. So a quick note on feedback then. And again, orientation-wise, you can find all this repeated in the various places in our course here, but this is just sort of pointing you that direction. So I don't give tons of comments on every little piece of writing that you do. That's not what the grade is based on. It sort of takes away from the dynamic of the workshop where you're getting feedback from your group rather than just waiting to hear what I have to say about it. But I am always willing, and in fact I love doing it, to talk with you just individually. If you're on campus, we can meet face-to-face. If you want to Skype or connect virtually some other way, I'm more than happy to talk with you about your writing in a much more specific way, kind of in a more personalized way, individualized way. But that's not really what the course is about. So just so you're clear going in terms of like how the grading works, but then how the feedback part is sort of reflected in that as well. Okay, so your the first thing that I hope you're feeling comfortable with is just the layout of the course. Again, figuring out what the due dates are, how they coordinate with the units. You can look into any of the units right now and kind of see what's coming up. Our first major thing is getting that student homepage done and the first discussion board done for our Unit 1. And then we turn around pretty quickly and get into Units 2 and 3. So that's me. That's our course. Ta-da! Hopefully you really enjoy it and you see the benefits, like I did finally, of how great the idea of an online, or the idea of a creative writing course can be in the online format. Maybe not intuitively the most sort of like, not the best marriage of format and content, but actually I've found that it works really, really well. So welcome. I hope you get comfortable soon. If you have questions or concerns, by all means be in touch with me, and I will talk with everybody soon.